Hello everyone. Welcome to the Open Expert Talks of this third edition of the Sustainable Challenge organized by Modafat, British Council and Design Manchester with the support of the Barcelona City Hall, to whom we thank for their collaboration, and we thank also the involvement of our partners, the Politecnico di Milano and Nova Universidade. The Sustainable Challenge is not just a one-off event, but an initiative for reflection on the problems of sustainability in fashion, its challenge and solutions, which this third edition wants to rethink the future of this industry from the sustainable point of view of industrial symbiosis. Digital technology is a format that offers us the possibility to open these today interesting talks not only to the participants in this program, but to everyone. It also offers the opportunity to connect with the vision and experience of all these experts and to participate in their reflections. We hope that since the welcome meeting, you have already had the opportunity to get to know each other within the teams already formed, so these talks will give you a creative push, awaken your critical spirit and inspire you, as we believe that the really important part of the challenge will be your ability to propose, reflect, discuss, collaborate and join visions for a common purpose. We encourage you to make the development of the project its best result, and that the result is your grain of sand for a more tolerant future where any human being feels comfortable and can express himself with freedom. So thank you very much, and go ahead.
Welcome to the expert talks of the Modafat Design Manchester Sustainable Challenge 2021, supported by the British Council. My name is Malcolm Garrett and I'm Artistic Director at Design Manchester. Design Manchester was established in partnership with Manchester School of Art in 2013, part of a year-round celebration of the school's 175th anniversary as the oldest undergraduate art school in the United Kingdom. Since then, with its annual conference and numerous events at venues all across the city, Design Manchester has been celebrating design in all disciplines, bringing designers and design thinking from across the UK, from around the world, to Manchester, and in turn taking Manchester to the world. Last year, due to the pandemic, the DM20 festival events were held entirely online, but that gave us the opportunity to continue to develop more of our international connections, including bringing us to Barcelona and the Sustainable Challenge. We are very excited then to partner with Modafat and the Sustainable Challenge for a second time this year. I'm particularly excited as this time we asked the students to address a challenge that faces us all, not just those in the fashion sector. And I'll be really looking forward to seeing some innovative outcomes. Each year we select a curator from Manchester to work alongside a counterpart here in Barcelona. We are delighted this year to welcome Elizabeth Cardwell, fashion stylist and lecturer at Liverpool John Moores University, to lead the workshop from the Manchester end alongside Veronica Cucinao, founder and director of Symbiosis in Barcelona. In the coming weeks, they will be working with the teams of students selected from the hundreds of applicants from Spain, the UK, Italy and Portugal. The teams will go on to present their workshop results on Friday the 19th of November after the DM21 Design Symposium. I'll now leave Lizzie and Veronica to introduce themselves, the challenge and tonight's speakers. Thank you.
Welcome everyone to this expert talk session. We are delighted to partner this Sustainable Challenge 2021 along with the British Embassy in Spain after the success of our first collaboration in 2020, just last year, and also to listen to our amazing experts today. Let me explain you a little bit more about the British Council. The British Council is the United Kingdom's international organization for cultural relations and educational opportunities. The Sustainable Challenge is part of our Circular Cultures program in Europe, and this program aims to promote greater awareness around circularity and making cultures. It aims to embed a more critical dialogue around design and circularity, develop skills and knowledge of making leaders, and also create new European networks around sustainability and circularity. The program currently operates across 9 countries across Europe: France, Greece, Italy, Poland, Portugal, Romania, Spain, Sweden, and the Netherlands. And in the last 3 years, more than 400 European designers received specific training related to sustainability in fashion, craft, and circular design, in partnership with very prestigious institutions such as Central St. Martin's, Meta, Fashion Revolution, Centre for Circular Design, University of Arts London, the Onassis Foundation in Greece, Modafat in Barcelona, the Worth Partnership Project funded by the European Commission, and of course our partners, Design Manchester. I wanted to thank the whole team at Modafat and to our partners, Design Manchester, and also the newcomers, Nova University in Lisbon and Polimi in Milan, for making this project happen. I hope that next year we'll be able to see us physically and to organize parts of this challenge in real life. And thank you, of course, to all our experts for sharing their expertise and knowledge. I hope you enjoy the session today. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name's Elizabeth Cardwell, and it's a real pleasure to introduce our first speaker, who, interestingly enough, is not a designer or a member of industrial industry, but she's a maven, a connector, and an extremely human being. I think she highlights the importance of storytelling, of building narratives and listening to stories. Having known Gemma for many years, I think I've witnessed and admired the way she's sort of worked when industry did not allow her to sort of hurdles or the success that she obviously was talented enough to get. She didn't just give up. She's made history work for her. She's given multiple voices to everybody. She's worked out herself how industry works, and then used her own platforms to. She's got her own company. She hosts, funds her own documentaries, written books. She's never allowed existing structures to stop, but used her place to bring human beings together. And I think if we replace the word industrial with human, it's a fantastic example of human symbiosis. Prior to looking at industry and sustainability in design, we need to look at the people before the processes. They are not just data. And before that, we need to look at ourselves. I'm going to hand over to Gemma so she can show you exactly what I'm talking about. So over to Gemma.
Hello. Hi. I hope that this is being streamed to perfection. I've been spoiled by spending many years in broadcast studios where I have a producer who helps me kind of tweak all the knobs and buttons and make sure there's a crisp picture or crisp sound. So hopefully this is all right. It's really lovely to be here. I'm really excited, actually. I'm a bit nervous, but excited to talk about industrial symbiosis. What a challenge indeed. Also, please ignore the burn on my lip, which I incurred last night whilst eating a toasted marshmallow. True story. Okay, here we go. Industrial, an adjective meaning to be in or related to an industry or having a lot of industry and factories, etc. Industrial output, industrial expansion, an industrial landscape, nation. That's what comes up when you look up the word industrial in the English dictionary. Symbiosis, the relationship between two different kinds of living things that live together and depend on one another. An example I found to describe this was the bird lives in symbiosis with the hippopotamus. And they do too. Birds often help hippos remove ticks when they get embedded in their skin. When being asked to talk to you about this subject matter, I thought, why me? I'm not an academic or a specific expert in any type of linear sense. But then I started to think about the way that I live, my style of life, my lifestyle, the way I think, the way my life has panned out so far, and both industry and symbiosis are so wrapped around me every single day. And I suspect that may be the same for us all. An industrial symbiosis interweaving into our hopes, our dreams, our melancholy, our skills, our wants, our needs, and our freedoms. My name is Gemma Kearney. My career in what essentially is storytelling and communicating in different forms as a broadcaster, writer, producer of sorts, has seen me so far explore parts of the world and meet and talk to many, many different souls from many, many walks of life who express and experience the world in many, many different ways. This has made me fall in love with the world over and over and over again. And I feel so grateful for that. It's also broken my heart at the learning of much injustice. The push, the pull, the yin and the yang, the potential of harmony in togetherness, the magic of symbiosis is embedded into my DNA. I'm a woman. I was born in the middle of the 80s, in the middle of England, in what they call a United Kingdom, to one white parent and one black, both of whose complex heritage, upbringings, and bloodlines ebb and flow far and wide. From the west of Scotland to a 1970s New York City, to the first generations of Jamaicans settling in Birmingham in the Midlands of England, and that isn't even half my story. I know I'm not alone in having parts of myself made up of many parts. How many of you watching and listening right now can quite literally relate to the beautiful nature of sharing and migration? A moment to please note. Relate is a word of which its origins date back to the 16th century, and an evolving of the word, the Latin word relat, meaning bring back. I found to ground myself in real history in order to use my gifts and privilege to industrialize progressively is something I can advise as an alleviating part of the creative process. To quote Jamaican-born leader of the Pan-African movement and civil rights leader Marcus Garvey, who was a prolific speaker and writer and activist in the 1920s and 30s with a mission of unity. A people without knowledge of their past history, origin, and culture is like a tree without woods. I implore all industrialists of the now and future to learn from the past to clearly define what did and didn't work. This applies to technological, architectural, travel, fashion and trend advancement. In many ways, so much of the work has already been done for us. So much already designed, built and worn. Perhaps true modernity could be to enhance our empathy and interconnections, and our skill set could be proudly enhanced by learning ways of mending and fixing what's been broken. When designing the new, there are two questions that I ask you all. What not only protects the planet we call home, but also heals it? What empowers our fellow humankind rather than exploits? Two very powerful and symbiotic forces that I believe we each need to interrogate and combat in order to a sustainable and fair future is both greed and overconsumption. Both of which are heavy to lift and so normalized and embedded into our systems that I am aware that courage comes with the innovation that we might be searching for. But I know from all that I've done so far in this life is that compassion, when it comes from within, it's infectious and courageous and creates networks and shoulders to lean on and arms to interlink with. To alternate, to heal, to nurture and incubate, fuse and fairer industry, now that excites me. And the arts and design are our intoxicating, informing and inspiring funnels to creating a better future. To name but a few moments of magic that I've had the joy of experiencing in my life, and I think many of us do as well, from the art of creation. How about the silence and captivation achieved in a theatre show where no one looks at their phone for over a couple of hours? The way in which a book can be a lifeline for somebody filled up with loneliness or lack of vision. The buildings that we live in and amongst, and how access to a big window to look out of or to open can affect the relationship that we have with our own breath. We must collectively address diversity in ethnicity, class, age, and gender at the tops of institutions. Revitalize at least the gatekeepers by finding our voices and using them to full effect. Learn from nature, galvanize in the spirit of community, and perhaps even celebrate how far we've come. I urge you to imagine always and endlessly, to create, to bend your mind in nourishment rather than destruction, and joyfully experience the wholeness and sense of purpose designing a creative life can be. But I do also beg you to consider the hope that you hold in your hands. Should you dare to expand on the potential of industrial symbiosis, steady your roots in knowledge of the past and the boundless leaps in advancement in all industry, be it train travel or even the righteousness of revolutionary ideology uprising from the oppression of so many. Good luck. Thanks for listening, and here's my further reading list.
Thank you so much, Gemma. Splendid explanation, introduction to this first session of the expert talks in the Sustainable Channels of this year, talking about industrial symbiosis. Well, we continue with the next, our next expert. He is Carlos León, and we are very lucky to have him because he's one of the main experts in circular economy, consultant in Spain. He just co-founded his company, Sustain. I think it was in 2014. And since then, he has been consultant of circular economy, cradle to cradle concepts, teacher, mentor of a lot of projects of all kinds, from business to territories. So as I said before, we are very lucky to have him here. This time, sharing his expertise around the concept of the life cycle and sustainability assessment, teaching us how to evaluate all the environmental, social, and economics impacts through all the value chain of the products. No? So thank you, Carlos. The stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Veronica, for the chance to share our experiences with all of you guys. And for me, it's a pleasure to try to share this concept. I hope you could use it in your projects, and I think it could be nice. So let me share the screen. Yeah. Could you see full screen? Yes. Okay. Well, what I would like to tell you today in the next 20 minutes, the life cycle sustainability assessment approach to be used on your projects, and it's a transversal approach that we can use in every product design and development in every sector. That well, I've just wanted to describe which is the approach and to use it in your projects. So just to mention who we are, in our mission is to guide organizations towards a circular and sustainable economic model through innovation, consultancy service, and sharing our knowledge. And we have been working with this concept for the last 5 years, and we have tried to do some projects, some pilot projects, try to demonstrate that this approach could be used in order to measure sustainability of a life cycle of a product, or even to use it in some let's say improvement of material or waste management system all along the which is the impact of this in the whole life cycle. So first of all, I would like to share with you some concept review because we are sometimes talking about some philosophies about sustainable development, ecological transition, green economy or circular economy. And there are some from philosophy to tools, to practical tools that one company or one project could use. There is a path. So we need to use some tools in order to reach this point, right? One of the tools to be used in the whole value chain that one product developer could use is the life cycle thinking, and with some other tools or methods like life cycle management or life cycle assessment. On top of that, we have the eco design and functional economy, industrial ecology, industrial symbiosis as well. And I guess you will use some of these concepts in your project. But today we are going to talk about life cycle thinking, and especially about life cycle sustainability assessment. So, of course, you already know what is circular economy, and that the main principles from regenerate the natural systems, keep products and materials in use, and design out waste and pollution from the design phases. Okay, so the thing about life cycle sustainability assessment approach is that we need to measure that the circularity has to be sustainable. So we have to move from a linear model to a circular model. That in this picture it sounds well easy, or it could be easy, but at the end, if we look at a particular process when we are thinking about developing a new product, developing a product is a sequence of different operations in order to get the final product to be distributed or to be sold to a customer or a distribution point. For example, in every operation, we are consuming different resources like water or energy or different auxiliary materials, and we are generating different kind of waste, like some scrap, some urban solid waste, hazardous waste, some wastewater. And at the end, this is just a simplification of a process. And imagine that we are thinking about a car, for example. Imagine the number of operations we could have. So at the end, if we are making a transition from a linear economy towards a circular economy, we should think about a different approach. You know, it's like every arrow that it's entering is coming into an operation. we should try to we should try that this material or cellular material or resource is coming from different recirculation, and at the same time, the arrows that are coming out from different operations, we should try to reduce or to eliminate this arrow, or try to make some recirculations, whether internally in a company or externally with using the industrial symbiosis concept, for example. So depending on the complexity of the product, this process could be huge. We could have hundreds of operations, and if we are talking about a more a simpler product, the process could be simpler. But at the end, as I mentioned before, we have to think about the circularity, of course, but we have to think that circularity has to be sustainable, and we have to prove it, and we have to measure it. So the main principles to consider in this transition, and maybe in your products or projects, is that we have to think in a life cycle approach, life cycle thinking, considering the different phases a product has from design and development phases until the end of life. We have to consider the triple impact, because if we are developing sustainable clothes or business or products or whatever, we have to think about the triple impact, because sustainability has to address the three dimensions: the economic, of course, environmental impact, and social impact as well. And of course, we are talking about circular economy, so we have to think about different recirculations we can use. Okay, so to do that, and in a product, and if we want to measure sustainability of the life cycle of a product, we have to think about the life cycle. So this is the key concept. The life cycle is the time interval between a product's conception and its disposal. So there are different phases from the concept of definition, design and development, and later on manufacturing or industrialization, some transportation or installation. In some products, we have some operation and maintenance activities, and finally the end of life of disposal. So we have to think that if we are conceiving a new product, or new business model, a new activity, a new improvement in a value chain, we have to think about the impact of this improvement in the whole life cycle. And if we are thinking about a product from the scratch, we have to think about all these phases. So well, we have the framework that is the life cycle, and we want to measure sustainability of the life cycle. So life cycle sustainability assessment approach, it refers to the evaluation of all the environmental, social, and economic negative impacts and benefits in the decision-making processes towards more sustainable products through the life cycle. So at the end, we have to combine different methods or techniques that this life cycle assessment technique used to assess the environmental aspects associated with a product during its whole life cycle. We have to consider the economical impacts through life cycle costing. That is the method to evaluate the cumulative cost of a product in this life cycle. And as well, we have to assess the social impact of the life cycle. So we have to consider, and we have to try to measure the social impact of products or services on the different stakeholders around the life cycle. So if we combine these techniques and these methods, we could be able to analyze the sustainability of the life cycle. The thing right now is that there is no reference to a practical reference to do that, and there is no recognized method to do that. There is a great research activity the last years about this and how to combine the different techniques, because here we are talking about different environmental impacts with different magnitudes, like for example, carbon emissions or acidification of oceans. Here we are talking about euros or other currency, right? But we are talking about money, and here we are talking about different kind of indicators if we consider the different stakeholders and different impact categories. So with these techniques, okay, you can use it for measuring a product, sustainability of a product, once you have designed this product or once you have manufactured this product. But the most interesting thing is that if we integrate these methodologies of these approaches at the early phases of the design process, we could estimate, or we could foresee which are to be well, the sustainability of one product or another alternative. So the thing is to help us to measure different kind of alternatives that could arise at the time that we are conceiving or designing different kind of products. So if we have the life cycle cost assessment at the end, in the different phases, when we are designing or we are conceiving the concept, the product concept, we are having some costs, for example, engineering hours or thinking hours or designing hours or validation hours and validation costs, of course. The bill of materials, the different materials and components we are using for this product. Of course, we'll have some manufacturing cost, the cost of labor cost, the cost of different auxiliary materials we need to manufacture a product. Within installation costs, we have to think about the transportation cost. Installation in some products, there is no installation phase. Later, we have to consider operation and maintenance costs, and finally, the end of life cost. Okay. Until now, while the end of life costs were not assessed and were not so, let's say, important, but with the new directives and with some countries that are introduced in the new directives from the European Union, there could be more and more important for some products. You have some reference about some international regulations or reference that you can have. You could have more information about the topic. So, for example, this is a life cycle cost assessment applied to a case study. In this case, there's a pharma product. Of course, if we are assessing the life cycle cost per unit of a pharma product, for example, you could have the distribution of the cost in the different phases. But for one alternative. But the most interesting thing is that you could use it to compare different kind of alternatives of the product you are designing. Imagining that you are you have to select a material for a particular part of a product. So if we are choosing different materials for this particular part, we have different alternatives for the product. So at the end, you will have different costs as well. Imagine that we are thinking about a different manufacturing process, or we can have different waste management system in different countries. So at the end, these alternatives build different product alternatives. So for these product alternatives, you will have different life cycle costs per unit. So with this, you will have the life cycle cost. The environmental part. So for these alternatives, we are thinking about at the very first phases of the conceptual design. We need to estimate the environmental impacts of the product, right? At this point, we have to make a clear difference between environmental aspect and environmental impact. Environmental aspects, it's every element, activity, product, or service of an organization that has an interaction to environment. For example, a material. Consumption of material is environmental aspect, consumption of energy, generation of emissions, or generation of different kind of waste in a particular activity. In a particular activity, like for example, a painting or coating, you can have different environmental aspects, and every one of these environmental aspects could provoke different environmental impacts. So any change to the environment, whether adverse or beneficial, is an environmental impact. And depending on the different methodology, we can have different kind of environmental impacts. We are not talking about just carbon emissions. We can have different environmental impacts for human toxicity and global warming, water use, freshwater ecotoxicity, terrestrial ecotoxicity. So every aspect of the product, consumption of material, resource, or generating different waste could generate different kind of environmental impacts. So of course, for this, you need kind of complex tools, but this is a thing that you could find some references in order to do let's say a brief estimation about or at least to consider which could be the environmental impacts of the things that you are thinking about. And at the end, we can have some midpoint environmental impact categories, and after that, you could bind, depending on different methodologies, let's say the impact in 3 main endpoint categories or main categories. That is the damage to human health, damage to ecosystems, and damage to resource availability. So until this, you could have for the different alternatives the life cycle cost per unit and the environmental impact in the different categories you choose, the midpoint or endpoint environmental impact categories, in order to compare the different solutions. Well, this is a simplification of life cycle assessment. So imagine that depending in using a particular methodology, that it could be different for textile or clothing or fashion sector, or for let's say automobile sector, that at the end the different parts of the product you could see which are the let's say the contribution of the different main parts of the product to different environmental impact categories. So for example, for the global warming, we can see that the product in here, it has a contribution of 50% of the global warming. Energy consumption, for example, more or less 40% or a little bit less than 40%. And finally, consumable used in the operation and maintenance phase, you could see that it's almost 10%. So you could analyze the let's say environmental impact of the different main parts of the product if you have different parts. This is a simplification of if you want to analyze the let's say the end point environmental impact categories of the different parts of the product, to damage to human health, to ecosystems, and availability of natural resources. And finally, the social part is what we have to analyze, which is the social impact that the product can have in the different stakeholders. And we have to assess the social and socioeconomic aspects of the products and their potential positive and negative impacts along the life cycle. So with this, there are some reference to take to have a look at this. For example, this is we have to think about first the different stakeholders around the life cycle of a product. That could be workers, local communities, the society, consumers, value chain actors. For the different stakeholder categories, we can define different impact categories. For example, human rights, working conditions, health and safety, cultural heritage, governance, and socioeconomic repercussions. And for this, there are some references that are defining some subcategories and at the end inventory indicators. So at the end, and there is an example here, for example, for the stakeholder worker, there are some subcategories already defined, and you can see here a reference where you can have a look. This is a document from the environmental program from the United Nations. It's guidelines for social life cycle assessment of products. They are working on a new versions, but in this version you can see which is the breakdown of categories for the different stakeholders, subcategories, and some indicators that you can use to measure. And sometimes there are some categories or subcategories and even indicators that are applicable to the case, and sometimes are not. But you have the whole list of categories, subcategories, and indicators. And for example, for the workers, you can think about if there is a fair salary. You can measure about working hours, if they are using child labor, or if there is a gender equality or equal opportunities, health and safety issues, and social benefits, for example. So with this, at the end, this is I just wanted, because we have just 20 minutes, because I just wanted to describe to you the approach that we need to measure we need to measure the 3 dimensions. And even if we are thinking about circularity and introducing some recirculations or using industrial symbiosis, the main approach is we always have to think about the life cycle. This is the framework. We always have to think about the triple impact, try to measure economic, social, and environmental impact. And of course, circular economy, it's within your minds and within your products right now. So yeah, just summarizing, yeah, I wanted to describe to you the approach and try to share with you that this is the approach that I think we will have to use in the next years, trying to measure sustainability and trying to avoid greenwashing that I am sure that you are seeing sometimes in the ads and television, other commercials. And we need to measure sustainability, and we need to prove that the circular economy that we believe that it is good, but we need to demonstrate that it is to provoke, let's say, more sustainability. Well, it was all open to all of your questions and any other queries within these 3 or 4 your projects.
Well, if there's no questions, I don't think they're coming through. I would just like to say thank you so much, Carlos. I think it's really amazing, these workshops, because we're getting to see sort of the industry in all its different facets. And that was just so interesting and so different to the sort of real creative design industry that we're going to talk through now. And thank you so much. And students who are watching this, like, you're incredibly lucky to be having a sort of a vision into all the different extremities in the industry. And yeah, on that note, I'd like to introduce maybe the yin to the yang of Carlos's presentation, which is Andrew Ibby. He is a highly creative and renowned artist, designer, and academic, currently principal lecturer at Liverpool John Moores University. He is going to talk you through his current brand, which is called eMcBean. Now, it's a feminist swimwear brand, which works to extremely sustainable practices. And I'm going to hand over to him without any words.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. My name is Andrew Ibby, and thank you for having me. That's the first thing I'd like to say. The symbiosis is this is a fantastic way to segue from the industrial position that Carlos has stated to maybe something that's more fundamental or kind of rudimentary, maybe. So I'm just going to share my screen if I can. Do this, and I need to do slideshow. So there we go. Right, so I'd like to start here, really. I'm going to start my stopwatch at the same time, but I'm just going to start with this slide that basically fashion is irresponsible. It's irresponsible for a number of reasons, and I think that the other question we're asking now is how do we create a healthy symbiosis between creativity and industry? And I think this is a really important question to pose from the ground up. So this is me, Andrew Ibby. I'm a designer, menswear, womenswear, other. I'm a brand owner, I'm an artist, I'm a program leader, I'm a visiting professor, I'm an ex-retailer buyer, I'm a DJ, I'm a race activist and commentator, and I'm just about to become a curator. So I think I might be fairly well positioned over a certain amount of years of sort of looking at fashion from a number of different perspectives to maybe offer some insight into the creative process and maybe how designers operate, and maybe shed a slightly different light from a designer's perspective. So the question is, why is it irresponsible? Well, we can start with these 5 points or umbrellas, as I call them. So there is an issue with the fashion industry with diversity. there is an issue with the industry, with sustainability and the environment. There's also the issue of cultural consumption. There's an issue with body image. There's an issue with the business of fashion, and we could go on. So what I'm going to talk about really is my role as an educator, and I guess I call it fashion education in practice, so fashion in practice. And where does that start? Well, I'm not going to start specifically from the top because that would probably take me too long, but I'm going to start after my graduation because I think this is really important. The processes we learn during university, processes we take into the industry, it's really important that we practice, I suppose, what we preach or what we've learned. So I was very lucky to work with one of the most important designers of our time, actually, so Joe Casely-Hayford. And I worked with Joe for a number of years at the end of the 90s after graduating in 96. And you can see from my work that we continued with originality, process, creative practice, a real authenticity about how we developed ideas. And that work I've carried into all of my opportunities, whether it's been working as a luxury menswear designer at Burlington, or whether it was working on building a streetwear line at Club Monaco in Toronto. And I think it's really, that job didn't last that long, by the way, and I could explain that, but that's probably another conversation. But I think it's very important that designers are taught an authentic education, and that they're taught to believe in their principles and take their values and principles into work. So, I mean, this was a really interesting way of maybe looking at some of the ideas that I teach, but to sort of imagine or create a brand. So it's creative application to industry. And how do you maybe launch a small, innovative and directional fashion brand at the ground point? So it is a high-end UK swimwear brand, and it's set to launch in 2020 commercially. We're now in 2021, and we've been interrupted the pandemic, but we are on our way. And I'm just going to talk about how we use creativity and how we build sustainable thinking and practice into the design process from the ground up, because it's important that we understand actually why we're designing, the purpose of our design, and maybe how important the creative process and the designer is to the supply chain further down the line. So I would always like to say that design starts with concept, originality and creativity. And if you start there, actually, you're already beginning that journey with sustainable thinking. What we're not doing is we're not copying. We're not relying on really kind of negative methods of design or development or placing goods into our social stream, our economy, that maybe aren't necessarily or needed, or rely on bad practice. So I think the origination of ideas from the ground up is really important. So in this case, is what does your brand stand for? What is it about? What are you saying about the world? What are you saying about yourself? And how are you going to creatively express those ideas? So we work with a number of visuals. We work truthfully and honestly with our ideas, and we work very conceptually in how we develop using traditional values in design development, like illustration, really deep and meaningful research imagery to create ideas and mood for development. You'll see that there are some sort of traditional ways of developing technical drawings, for instance. So our process will take something like Boccioni's unique form and imagine that as a piece of swimwear. So we have a very creative approach from the start. And this is important, further down the line when we start to think about our customer and how we're going to disseminate this information and who we're speaking to. The other thing I always like to talk about is what are our brand values you know, at that development phase. So, you know, of course, for us, we're a modern brand. We deal with sportswear, so we are working with ECONYL regenerated nylon. That in itself has some problems. It's great to regenerate nylon, but we're still working with nylon. So I think that even working with ECONYL it doesn't save the planet. You know, if we're making thousands and thousands and thousands of swimsuits, actually the value of that swimsuit will soon deteriorate, which means that the same nylon will end up in waste anyway. So this is where it's really important to consider the responsibility around your design product and pitching where it is going to be in the market space. This is very important for design moving forward. Within our brand, we are very conscious of how we are being socially responsible. So it's just not a question of how we build and how we sustain our products. It's also about identity and representation. What does your brand actually say about a future-facing planet? Who is it for? Who should wear it? And these values are actually important to the brand because it gives your product some sort of value. It's not a disposable product. And this is part of the problem with the fashion industry at this point. There are far too many disposable products on the market. When we develop a product, we develop it properly. We use traditional craftspeople to cut, to sew, to develop our samples. We're now moving into using 3D methods in design packages like Clo 3D now to cut down our sampling costs even more. So we're now embracing new technology against old tradition as well. So a new business should be flexible in how it operates. There are flaws in tradition that sometimes the future repairs, and we should think about the symbiosis between those two mechanisms as well. Again, our narrative when we show clothes, when we show our product and when we show our ideas, it's always going to be authentic. And we talk about representation a lot now. And this is what the world needs. So it's really how all of these ideas come together, not just sustainable, but a brand that's responsible, the brand that has true values, has real value to the market, which enhances the product value of your items, which is what's important when we think about the next stages of implementing a brand into market. We work with a number of craftspeople, so you can see on the left-hand side, it might be on the right, I'm not sure, but as I'm looking, it's on my left, and I work with a leather artisan called Claire Payne, and you'll see from the left that we encourage unique pieces to be made, one-off pieces. It's a very traditional, again, a very traditional way of working. I myself am trained as a tailor, so I'm quite used to hand sewing or fitting garments. So we're borrowing information that's already out there. It may be lost to some generations, but the idea of hand sewing, mending, or fixing is very much part of our DNA as a brand now. On the right-hand side is a collaboration with a milliner called Lucy Barlow, who makes the most fantastic hats. And what you'll realize, or what you can see, is that this handcraft element of what we do is really important to how we develop products. And you'll see here, these are some of our principles and our resources and values. So we begin to merge these ideas together. So you'll see the central image of the Lucy Barlow handmade hat. Again, with the kaftan, it's also handmade, made to order. And on the right-hand side, there's a limited edition run of organic cotton t-shirts. We have what we call repurposed products. So we're always sourcing dead stock products that are already out there. So we work with existing textiles and we reimagine them through creativity. That's how we use our creativity. We'll take an old baseball cap and reimagine it as a new piece of artwork or a new idea. And some of these ideas are playful. We're not always trying to create a commercial model. Sometimes we're just trying to connect an idea or make a statement through our art direction and our activity. I will just play this actually if I can. I'm not sure how sound translates, but this was a performance we put on recently.
For the place to remain, and a way to be paved, and a place to behave. As I wake and I pray and give thanks for each day for my goals and my pain. If it means a safe day, will never seek a father and their partner. They will not ignore the signs of designer. I strive for everything they've ever been deprived of. I only have one goal to go after. I go kick back. Setbacks, left out, let in, let out, within, without, in out, let down, slow down, cried out, slow down, grow crown, so now I'm found, give thanks, I'm out of order. Defining myself just to stand out of water, killing myself just to claim bricks and mortar, diving inside just to find out I'm water. They can't hold on to an old hell that they still like it's freedom. I had to fall down just to drown, deeper meaning. I pray to him to reveal my path for healing, and I cry me a liver salon, not one for streaming. But feelings, have you telling yourself that there's a hell in yourself?
So that was a piece we done at London Fashion Week. So again, this is about brand value and establishing market space with meaningful content. So really talking to our potential consumers and being very serious about the world and what we do. It's not disposable, and I think that's a really important value for any designer now coming through the education system. It doesn't matter which level you're proposing to work at. Our work needs value. And if we don't have that value, we've got a real problem moving forward. And now from the, what's great is when you do something that actually is authentic and is pure and is interesting and does challenge the status quo and does challenge the norm, actually people like to write about you. So in terms of creating something that is commercial and that is does have a market, you'll find that utilizing the creative process will offer you that opportunity. So this is a couple of just slides from our press from the show, and it's quite nice to be written about in such terms. So the art-based punk-influenced swimwear brand Emmet Bean aims for women to reclaim ownership of their bodies and disrupt the narrative of traditional anodyne swimwear by creating powerful and unique pieces that explores the fluidity of the female body. I couldn't have written that better myself, and I'm really happy that that's how our work's being received. It is also challenging the market to think a little bit more about the messages and the content that we're putting out there. So this is the current collection, and it's utilizing all those ideas that we've spoken about. So reclaiming textiles, working with new materials, working with technology, working with craftspeople, utilizing other brands and their expertise to create accessories. But at the heart of what we do is creative practice, to create something interesting and new for a market that maybe is slightly exhausted. So we need a creative process to create more. You'll see that there's a bag actually. I think it's top center, the big white one. That used to be an armchair that I found. It was outside our house. And I stripped it down, washed the leather and sent it to Claire Payne, who then turned it into this amazing beach bag. So the resources are all there, but we just need to apply creativity. So this is just a recap of everything you've seen in this kind of experiment that I've been teaching theory of fashion for a little while, and this is kind of an experiment on, well, if I applied these principles, what would happen? So first of all is a meaningful design practice. So, why are you even bothering to be a designer? What's your purpose as a designer? So please make your design practice meaningful. The second part is about originality and imagination to create new ideas. We have to think about something new. We're not necessarily here to just replicate, what we've seen. We've got enough stuff out there already. So if you're not actually engaging with any kind of originality or imagination, you're only just regurgitating what's already out there anyway. So what would be the point in that? We already have all that stuff. I think small, fair and local manufacture levels is fair. So, to any brand actually, when is enough enough, when is too much. Now, the fashion industry right now is too much. So we all need to really think about how we can be fair and how we can work with manufacturers. It doesn't matter where they are in the world, but make sure that what we're doing is fair and honest. Craft and limited edition items, we have an abundance of them in our collection. People like the idea of owning something that's specific. They have done for decades. So it's very strange that that's kind of it's missing from how we develop fashion at this point in time. Of course, there's repurposing of old textiles in there. Technological advancement in textile development. So there are fabrications now on the market that are challenging some of those old processes in textile development. You work with available resources. So what do you have? Let's not dream too big all the time. Let's not try to take over the planet. Let's think about what our resources are and who we are as designers and what are we trying to say. So there's some honesty in there as well. Made to order is something we're seeing as well. Why do we need so much stock? We don't need so much stock. So why don't we just have a small stock inventory? Or why don't we have no stock at all? So we are providing very special items to our customers. We have non-seasonal products that don't die in 3 months or 2 months or 6 months, products that could last for 15 years if you wanted them to. Renewal of design is limited. So the idea that we don't have to keep redesigning every season all of the time. I think we call it slow fashion. And then the other thing is, of course, is utilizing new digital and 3D development programs. So we aren't wasting so many resources and textiles during that development phase. And that could apply to a small designer or a big designer. So these are a few of my thoughts at ground level. So at the heart of any strong design practice is the recognition of resource limitation. And we all have resource limitations, even some of those big brands. And I think the use of imagination and creative practice to maximize opportunity. A good designer processes this information accurately. So fashion business is currently stuck in a cycle of lavish, accessible excess and cheap instant gratification. It is the business of fashion that must change. So as much as I'm really interested in how we measure sustainable practice, actually the business of fashion needs to change. I mean, again, for me, it's designers are innately adept at solving problems. And on the other hand, businessmen by nature look for shortcuts and fast ways to make money. Who do you trust with the future of the planet? This was something I was just thinking about, because actually for years designers have been told, that's going to be too expensive. We can't possibly use that process. And where we've ended up now is really we've ended up with a lot of, I want to go back to the presentation. We've ended up with a lot of cheap, We've ended up with a lot of cheap and unsustainable processes. We've ended up with a lot of fashion that's disposable. We've ended up with a lot of products that mean nothing to nobody. And we've ended up with landfill. And we need to start really thinking about, when we design something as young designers, if I'm talking to young designers or talking to students in universities, you really have to start thinking about how do you add value to the world that already has something. And if you want to design, how can you design processes into your practice that limit the pain on the environment? And this is really a simple mechanism from one designer to another, and thinking about some of the businesses I've worked for and how the business has tarnished the design. So to set one design out that should be going into production, but to have it reduced down to pennies, and then for it to be developed and sold at price point that's accessible to too many people. And actually the consumption, so the consumer has no respect for that product once it lands in their bag. What do you think they're going to do with it next? So I think that it's really about us as designers now looking carefully at our processes and being very creative about the future and how we work with design, and specifically in this instance, fashion. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Andrew. I'm really impressed of all your thinkings. So interesting. I would say that I will take this irresponsibility just to change this to be responsible. Not only the designers, the manufacturers, the users, or the customers. So maybe they can make us a sort of synergies between them and make us the whole more conscious of the decisions that we are taking.
And I think that business should listen to designers. I think designers are actually the key to the future. The people who imagine the world, because you know, we can't keep making clothes at the rate we're making them. And the designers and the brands need to speak to the consumers, because if we offer something cheap and cheerful, of course the consumer is going to accept it. Everybody loves fashion. It's incredibly seductive. Everybody wants a new jacket. Everybody wants a new coat. The question is, do we really need it? Do we really need 20 coats? Do we really need 60 pairs of shoes? And it's become a question now of there's an expectation that the consumer can have all those shoes. The consumer doesn't need all those shoes. I think it's Vivienne Westwood talks about this a lot. You know, buy one thing and spend your money on it, and then love it and keep it and hand it down to your daughter or your son. And I think that solves a lot of our issues around sustainable thinking.
And I think the relationship between the designer and the industry would be very industrial or handcraft, but the industry, the manufacturers, it's also very, very important because it makes it possible in an efficient way. So thank you very much, really, Andrew. And this just leads us to our next expert. She is Eura Ventura. Eura Ventura is a product and materials engineer, and she works in the Institute of Textiles Research and Industrial Cooperation of Terrassa in the Polytechnical University of Catalonia. And she is a specialist in these things, in making sustainable textiles, innovating materials, these things that Andrew was talking that are coming into the market. And well, we are very, very happy to have her here. So Eura, she's also in this project mentoring as an expert with Enrique Carrera. He's the director of the Institute. Enrique, hello. Thank you both for being here. And the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. First of all, on behalf of all the Intexter team, we would like to thank the organizers for counting us in these talks. From Intexter, we work in research and industrial cooperation projects and other initiatives. So for us, we are very happy to be able to share our textile background in this case. Let me share the screen so I can share the presentation. I hope that you are already seeing it. Well, this is Enrique, this is me. We work together in Intexter, and as I was telling, we work by cooperating with in research, but also in cooperating with some companies in order to make those technical developments that are necessary in order to increase the sustainability. So basically in this talk, we pretend to provide a general overview of the current situation of the textile industry in terms of sustainability along all the textile value chain, and to have a look about which challenges and which business opportunities that this situation leads. Okay, I would like to focus on 3 points. I guess that we are in between two of the presenters, so I understand that the audience will be quite familiar with some of the terms, but we need to give first a proper context. And this proper context needs that we must to agree which means sustainability. And as Carlos said before, basically, sustainability is focused in 3 P's: the P for people, the P for planet, and the P for profit. And we can have several systems depending on which things we focus. For example, between planet and people, we would have a system which is variable, between people and profit, a system that is equitable, and between planet and profit, a system that is viable. But only by mixing all these three dimensions, the social, the economic, and the environmental one, we can have a sustainable product. And this is very important, and it is key to understand this. In fact, for the textile industry, it has been considered as a pollutant industry because of the waste waters and also the CO2 release due to the own processes, also the use of chemicals. And for example, for the social dimension, historically, the textile industry has been connected with child labor and gender equality problems. Luckily, during the last century, this has started to change, of course, because it's not only the profit what it accounts. So the first change was in trying to make it more social, to working on the social dimension, and lately it is changing towards a higher eco-friendly production. For understanding all this, it is kind of related what was Carlos talking before, but we need to understand which is the textile value chain. In this case, for us, from the technological point of view, the textile value chain starts with the production of fibers that are transformed into yarns by spinning techniques. Then these yarns are transformed into fabrics by weaving or knitting or other processes. And those fabrics need to be adapted to, they need a color, a properties that are mostly applied during finishing. And with these finished fabrics, we can produce garments, and then the end of the textile value chain ends with those logistic and retailer companies that trade these garments and approach them to the general public. So the idea is, which is the role of circular economy in here? Basically, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation summarizes it very well. We first need to understand which is the amount, the problem, no? Which size it has this problem. Basically, of course, the world population has been growing during the last decades. So they need also the need of clothes. However, this growth has not been proportional. We now have more clothes in our wardrobes, and the worst thing is that when we discard them, we have used them much less times. So we are here focusing a problem which is basically about what happens when we discard them. As an example, regarding textile waste, in Spain, it is estimated that 1 million tons of textile waste are produced per year. From these, 900,000 tons are from post-consumer textiles, and only 10% of these tons are selectively separated for do an appropriate waste treatment. And this is a large problem about waste. Let's be sincere. When the consumer decides that the garment has reached the end of life, and this means that sometimes this garment could be it is still usable, but the user decides to discard it. We have three possibilities. One possibility could be to reuse it, to send it for the second-hand market. However, this second-hand market is quite limited, and there are some countries, especially in Africa, for example, that they were great consumers of second-hand clothes. However, they are limiting their import policies. So there's an even smaller market now. The other possibility would be to recycle them. We will see now that it's not that easy than it seems, and this means basically that more than 70% of these textile waste ends incinerated or in a landfill, which is in fact quite sad. So we are facing a problem of this textile waste accumulation, and thinking in circular economy can help to redress the problems, because in this circular economy, the waste generated during the life cycle of a product is used as the raw material for a new one. Basically, we are trying to skip this last step on the textile value chain, on the product life product, by replacing the final disposal with a further recycling, further process, in order to make this waste the raw material for a new product. But as I was saying, this is not as easy as it seems. First of all, first principle, the more information we have, the better. It is much easier to recycle pre-consumer textile remnants than post-consumer textile waste, for example. This is mainly because the separation of each fiber by composition is a major challenge, and it's very necessary for many of the recycling suits. So the traceability is key. It's a very, very important topic. Basically, to recycle those garments at the end of their life, we have three main possibilities. We have a mechanical route, which is valid for any kind of fibers, even including mixtures of, I don't know, polyester and cotton, for example. Okay, but in this process, the shredding process tends to damage and shorten the fibers, and this limits not only the number of times that we can recycle them, but also even the further processing we have limitations. Sometimes we have to add virgin fibers in order to be capable to process this kind of residue. Another route would be the chemical. Chemical would be probably the optimal one, because it goes back to the lowest point to the polymer and then repolymerizes again to obtain new fibers. But this needs a clear and a very, very good separation from these fibers by its nature, and this is not sometimes it's a quite complex process, in fact. The third route, which would be the thermal, and this thermal route it's mainly only available for the thermoplastic fibers. So between these three options, we should be moving. So let's go to the second point, which is, in fact, let's see which challenges and opportunities arise from the textile value chain. First step, as we were saying, was to the obtaining of the fibers, as is shown in this graphic. Basically, the two most highly produced fibers are polyester and cotton, and of course they have these impacts associated of water waste, water use, CO2 generated, and also the chemicals. So there is, against this challenge, there is any possibility to work, of course. For example, for polyester, we can use, instead of virgin polyester, we can use this recycled polyester that comes from PET bottles, which requires a lower processing energy. This could be an option. For example, what about the cotton? The cotton, we can say that there are, and it is growing, luckily, there are possibilities of producing organic cotton without the use of chemical products. And in fact, there are even eco-labels that are supporting all these initiatives and verifying that these materials are what we expect from them. Another possibility, which is quite interesting, because we were talking about trying to give second lives to the waste, it's this Tencels Refibra, which is in fact a regenerated cellulose fiber. That normally regenerated cellulose comes from renewable resources, mainly wood. But in this case, it is not only wood, but they also incorporate part of cotton scraps from post-consumer, also from post-consumer sources. This meaning that we have part of virgin but sustainable and part of already recycled material. And this process can be done very efficiently by recovering even almost all the solvents used on the process. So we can have good alternatives for these fibers. There are opportunities, okay? What about the yarn spinning? Second step, let's pass from these fibers into yarns. Basically, we brought here two concepts, two main ideas. One of them is that using multi-filament yarns can reduce the microplastic release on wastewaters, and this is a problem in our oceans. So we can think about choosing which yarn to use when we are deciding, we are defining our product. But mainly the basic trend in spinning is to try to shorten the yarn spinning process for staple fibers. And this means that, for example, currently the open-end spinning systems are preferred to ring spinning systems because they are much shorter, they require much less steps, so lower energy required for the process. Regarding fabric production, of course, Industry 4.0 is helping a lot in order to optimize all those processes and the consumptions, and even to reduce all the remnants or production remnants that arise from the own process. But it is interesting to know that there are technologies available that can simplify the garment manufacturing process during the own fabric production. This is an example. You have here two examples. One, it is this kind of knitting that allows to produce the pieces with the shape already, or directly the whole t-shirt without no sewing steps. So quite interesting. Regarding after we produce the fabrics, regarding the finishing processes, we should say that the focus is basically in reduction of the water consumed and the use of chemicals, especially those that are non-eco-friendly, that are trying to be substitute. And as an example for these ideas, we could mention, for example, that instead of padding, there are other finishing systems. For example, applying the different finishings with foams, which use a lower amount of water. And another idea is this one you have in this image here. Typically, jeans were treated in washing machines with some stones to make all those wasted kind of aspects. But currently, we can use lasers with no water, so very, very efficient finishing treatment. Because in fact, we do not use almost no water is required to produce this worn-like finishing. There are other possibilities. I think that Andrew was already mentioning them. They are turning into something digital. In this case, the use of digital techniques can also help processes such as like garment manufacturing or even distribution. Nowadays, we can directly produce a garment in 3D and put it on an avatar and know how the garment will look before starting any of these steps. So very it is reducing the amount of matter that is required for the whole design process. But the biggest opportunity in this case, I think, it's that there is a growing awareness on all those environmental problems, and there is a market that is claiming for sustainable textile products. So this is a major opportunity, not only for the textile sector to sell those products, but also to reduce the general ecological print. So this is very, very encouraging. And leading to the third point that I wanted to talk, basically, we must make a question is how can a designer take actions to reduce the environmental impact of garments? Is there any possibility? Of course there is. In fact, the best moment in which we can do these actions is when nothing is created, where the system has not started yet. So we can use eco-design as a tool. Eco-design, in fact, is the integration of environmental aspects in the product development, in all the stages of the product development, and considering the whole product life of the whole life cycle of the product. So basically, we can use eco-design strategies in order to try to make our products in the design phase much more sustainable, much more environmentally friendly. We can divide them into these 5 groups. Basically, raw materials mean trying to use only a single material or reducing the impact of the materials that we use. In production, we already said that we can use these cleaner production systems. About distribution, we can reduce air the packaging, the labelings, and the distances that we use to transport all the matters from one side to the other. Regarding the use, we can think about modular design, of servitization, shared use of garments, for example, design for repair, minimize the washing and ironing needs of the garments because it's one of the most highest impacts on our garments. And for the end of life, we can think of recyclable and biodegradable materials, and we can also think about designing for this assembly. So let me just give you a very, very fast look about how to use these eco-design strategies to make better products. This is, for example, about lowering impact in using low impact materials from a Spanish brand that uses fishing nets recovered from the oceans in order to produce jackets, for example. About production, we can do directly the upper part of a shoe directly with a knitting machine, and this will save lots of processes of sewing and lots of remnants of fabrics, for example. Regarding distribution, we can avoid labels by printing directly the information on our garments, but we also can, I guess that this might be the future of labeling. We can also implement traceability systems in the labels. In this case, this one it has an antenna, so we can load information in the own label of the garment to improve the information that we have at the end of the life of the product, to know what we have in our hands in order to recycle it. And some eco-design strategies for use. I love this one particularly. These are garments that grow with our kids, basically to try to prolong the use of the product, which is another eco-design strategy. Or we can also rethink what our product is, because we can sell textile products or we can sell services. Here you have two examples about a servitization on carpets, or a servitization, a renting, in fact, of jeans. This means that the owner is the company and the user basically is hiring a service instead of buying a product. And luckily, we also can find some examples about design for disassembly, products that are made only with a single material in order to make them easier for recycle when it ends its end of life. So very shortly, as a conclusion, we can talk about how can we increase the sustainability of garments. Basically, by defining and rethinking the product concept, by choosing eco-friendly raw materials processed with low-impact technologies, by reducing distribution distances, by betting for local providers, or considering the end-of-life of garment scenarios, and promoting corporate social responsibility policies. Because basically, we are designing environmentally clean, socially fair, and economically viable products, from design to eco-design towards a sustainable design. Because if it's not sustainable, in fact, it is not a good design. So, yeah, here I am coming back. I hope. Thank you very much for your attention. And if yes. Sorry, I couldn't.
Amazing. Thank you so much. It was so clear. I think everybody in the stage, everybody finally will understand all the concepts and how the industry, the designing of the materials, the impact on the manufacturer has. Thank you so much. And hope that, well, let's see what the students are, the ideas that are coming up. For sure, some of them should be related to this technological point of view. Thank you, Eura. Thank you, Enrique. Lizzie, we are in the end of the day.
I really enjoyed that. Thank you so much to all of the guest speakers. But I agree, Veronica, that last one really made it really clear, I think, for me and probably everybody, the exact nature of industrial symbiosis. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to another day of speeches tomorrow. We've got Tash Wilcox coming and Mark Shaler, which again, I think they're better introducing themselves, but they're much more going to talk about the sort of circular design process as opposed to the more conceptual approach we had today. Who have you got, Veronica?
Well, I think we will have 2 examples of businesses that already are running and applying all these concepts into their business. So we will have the experience from the young companies and entrepreneurs. So we are lucky for tomorrow.
Oh, brilliant. Well, yeah, thank you everybody for watching, and we'll see you again tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for the experts. Bye-bye. See you tomorrow.
Bye-bye.